claim. Now, for our last speaker, I want to make two really important things clear. Māori Council, we don't have a vested interest in owning anything. It's owned by the people, not by a single institution. And I will labour this point. It will be your Māori Council, because it's not my Māori Council, it's your Māori Council that will take the case to the High Court. All right, so a lady over here said, will you take a case to the High Court? Absolutely we will. We'll take the Crown on in their own institutions and get a determination, because we're fighting not for the carve-up of water, but for the ownership of water. Just as we fight for the ownership of land and the ownership of all resources that matter to Māori, including the air up here, otherwise known as spectrum. The second thing we are doing, and we will not get away from, is stopping the foreign ownership of water being taken from our grounds, from our aquifers, from our rivers, and sold overseas. There is a drought up here. On anyone's imagination, it's stupid to let everybody else come in and take our water and ship it overseas. It's not their water, it's our water. So I said before, I just wanted to clear that up, get that on the table. But as the Māori Council, we're dealing with 42 individual kaupapa. 42 individual kaupapa. And I'm going to give you an insight into that, because at the end of this, I want you to feel as if you can come to us no matter what the issue is, and we will fight on your behalf. The first issue we're dealing with is housing. Housing crisis in New Zealand is real, and many of you will know it. You'll see it every single day. But there are two aspects to this that not many people talk about. The first is the affordability of housing. Now, if you're in one of the cities, the chances are if you're on a low income, you cannot afford to live where you work. In fact, we have families who are living in their cars outside Pack and Save car parks at the Point Chev boathouse. Now, these are not unemployed Māori, these are the working poor Māori, because they're basically just on shit wages. They're on crap wages. And that's because we have got ourselves into such a situation, thanks mostly to the education system and how the government treats us, a situation where we are only part of what is called the low wage growth side of the economy. Hell, apparently we're only good for planting trees. We're only good for driving buses. But I would labour this point, we're good for nursing, doctors, teachers, IT specialists, everything in between. Absolutely. And in order to be able to afford to live in a house these days, no matter whether it's in Kaikoui or whether it's in Upper Hutt or down south in Invercargill, you require a decent living wage. Now, I don't know too many people who are Māori or even middle class and lower class Pākehās who have that right, and that should be a human right. So the question is, you can go and build all the houses you want, but if somebody can't afford to pay the bills or live in that house, then what's the point? We might as well just get boxes. Boxes. The other point I'd make too is the government does very little when it comes to investing in things like papakainga housing and kaumātua housing. I'll tell you how much the government put aside for papakainga housing, $10 million this year. Now, $10 million to build 10 houses and try and maintain 100 more. I mean, what is that? That is an absolute joke. So the first thing is about affordable housing when it comes to the rental market, and the second is about our ability to save for a house. And how can you save for a house if you're part of the low wage form of the economy? You're only keeping your heads above water. And that's why the Māori Council is taking a housing claim against the Crown, and the first major hui will be on the 22nd of March down in Papakura Marae in Auckland. And you're all welcome to come. And then after that, we'll be travelling around and also having a look at some of the amazing things that our people are doing, but they're not able to grow to capacity because the government's not willing to put any money on the table. And it's not just the government, it's also the banks. If you go into a bank and you apply for an overdraft or a credit card or just a small form of finance, the chances are you're going to get knocked back. Note that last name sounds like a Māori name. You don't earn enough. You can't have this, you can't have that. Well, I'm here to tell you that the Māori Council is having a look at bringing back and restoring the Māori Bank. The Māori Bank. Otherwise affectionately known as, somebody said, oh, what are you going to call your Māori Bank? Well, pretty simple, Te Bank. How hard is that to understand, you fellas? How hard is Te Bank to understand for you? Now, if you remember, the Māori Bank was in existence pre-1930s. In fact, the Māori King's face even adorned the banknotes. So why do we have to always be trapped in their cycle and their institutions? We've got to start creating our own. If we want self-determination, if we want to own things, if we want to do good by our kids, then we need to start fronting up and building our own infrastructure and our own institutions. And I'll tell you now, the Māori Council will support any organisation that wants to get on that bus. Come and join that journey. Next one is the land bank. Wow, who's heard of a land bank? There's an act of Parliament that very few people know, and it's called the Ministry of Works Act, or the Public Works Act. The Public Works Act has allowed the government for many, many decades to come in and take your land by compulsory acquisition to build a road or a bridge or whatever it is. But when they're done with that road, when they're done with that bridge, when they're done with that land on that school, do you think they give it back? No, but the law says it should be returned to the original owner as a first offer. Problem is, of course, if you get a piece of land and say the old DSIR centre that was taken in Wallaceville and Upper Hutt, then chances are you won't be able to afford that land back. You want that land back, but you now have to pay a higher price for it. Well, bugger that. The Public Works Act was meant to be fair for all New Zealanders, not just the God-gifted few who are able to buy stuff. And that's why the land bank is important, to be able to bank that land, return it to public hands, or back into the ownership of Māori. So that's the other part that we're working on as well. I want to turn my attention now to the work that we're doing in the health system, mental health and suicide prevention. Now, I've been in the world of suicide prevention for a very long time, and all of you probably know someone who has taken their lives or attempted. In fact, hands up who knows somebody that has actually taken their life and their family. There you go. Look at that. It's sad. It is sad. In fact, Māori have the highest suicide rate per head of population now anywhere in the world, the Western world. OECD, call it what you will. The highest suicide rate in the world, particularly amongst young Māori males. And yet we've got a whole lot of service providers out there who have been plying the same trade in their little industry, making millions and millions and millions of dollars, and nothing has changed. And yet we're having more of a conversation about giving them even more money because they're telling us they still have the answers. I'll tell you where the answers are. I chaired Suicide Prevention Australia for 8 years. 8 years. I got into it because my best friend took his life. And I wanted to go on a journey to find out why he did what he did. Here in New Zealand, though, the journey has been watching a whole lot of mistakes being made because no one's listening to the families and the communities where this tragedy is unfolding. In Australia, we had a very simple program, and it was called Communities Matter. We need to invest more in the community because who knows best what to do than the community itself? Not these fly-in, fly-out Pākehā service providers from Auckland Central or Wellington down the line. The money should go directly into your communities and your families because you have the answers. And that is why the Māori Council is fighting very hard. I mean, we're the ones that released the coronial data when all these service providers started gathering a message about nothing to see here, kapai. We're the ones that took them on last year and will continue to do so, and that's why we're fighting for a new kaupapa service delivery model run by Māori, for Māori and by Māori. And let those be the three catchphrases that all of us take away from this tent today. And in fact, the first line of proposals is going out next week. That draws us back into the wider issue of health. You might have seen that it was the Māori Council that stood alongside Wiki and Malcolm Mulholland to fight for affordable medications for our Māori women when it came to breast cancer. Yep. And in fact, it was this woman in the corner, somewhere over here, Raywin Harrison, who sits on the executive of the Māori Council, that brought it up in September of 2018, and we haven't stopped since until they started to schedule that medication. Now, put some numbers around that. I don't know how many of our Māori wahine can afford $60,000 a year for a drug called Ibrance that in Australia only costs $40 a month. And yet our people have been making decisions not only about the quality of their life, but spending more time with their family. Our Māori women should not be denied a fighting chance at life just because some Pākehā decision maker at Farmac down in Wellington has somehow control over us. And it's not just breast cancer medication. It's lung cancer medication, prostate cancer medication, bowel cancer medication, spina bifida medication. Every one of our people are at risk of being touched by the inability to afford life-saving and life-extending medications. So what's next for us is to take the fight again up to Farmac, supporting in Wiki and Malcolm Mulholland, and Raywin's got a petition we'd love everybody in this tent to sign. We should not to be denied a chance at life just because we might not be able to afford the drugs that we need. That's a really important message. And then there's the DHBs. Who's got a story about a DHB? Those District Health Board buggers. I'll tell you what those District Health Boards do. They employ a whole lot of people in admin, they employ a whole lot of people on the board, mostly Pākehā, although we're meant to celebrate that a few cheers this time around in our Māori. But if you have a problem, if you have an issue with your health, trying to get through the process of a District Health Board is a nightmare. And here's another big important thing that a lot of people don't know. Our Māori nurses get paid less to provide key support and services to our communities if they work for an iwi Māori organisation. And yet, if they did the same job at the District Health Board, they'd be paid a lot more. And here's the magic part. Here's the magic part. It's those same DHBs that contract those Māori health providers provide the same service that their nurse would provide as an employee of the DHB. It absolutely is disgusting that our Māori nurses should get paid less for providing the same service than other nurses working for a DHB. In other words, what I'm saying is the whole health system is not for us, it's against us, and that is why we have the worst rates of asthma, the worst rates of cardiovascular and heart disease. I mean, look at me, I'm a poster child for blood pressure medication. Oh yeah, I am the poster child for blood pressure medication. How many of you fellas out there have got those little orange or blue pills? Yeah, look at you, brother. We have the worst rates of cardiovascular disease, the worst rates of asthma, the worst rates of cancer, and yet somehow, when it comes to services here in the north, everyone's forgotten about you fellas. Everybody's forgotten. And in fact, if you need cancer treatment, you've got to go all the way down to Auckland. You've got to put petrol in your own car, you've got to make arrangements, take days off work or what have you, find a babysitter and go to Auckland for your treatment. And that's got to stop, and that's why the Māori Council is also fighting to ensure that cancer, modern cancer equipment, radiography, all of these different things are stationed right here in the north. Right here in the north. You should not go past your home around the corner and then down the line to have to get treatment to save your lives. The next one I want to talk about is Oranga Tamariki. Hey, oh, Oranga Tamariki. You know, the problem with Oranga Tamariki is pretty simple. We don't need more reports to tell us what's broken and what's wrong. And I'll go back to that little brown-eyed boy, James Whakarudu, who was killed at the hands of his parent. We knew then that the system was broken. We knew it back in the 1970s. In fact, on average, since 1950, 60 to 70% of all children in state care were our children. And we've all seen stories of uplifts gone wrong. We've all seen stories where those children shouldn't have been taken from their whānau for no other reason than the social worker also had bias against Māori. So this is what the Māori Council is not proposing, we are doing. We are not going to wait for any more reports to act, and that's why we've intervened under Section 18 of the Māori Community Development Act, and we've put a take down on the table with Oranga Tamariki, and we're bringing back to life the old community development officers, the old Māori welfare officers. They are the people that have the ability and the power. They predate Oranga Tamariki and SIFs. They were active in our Māori communities in the 1940s, the 1950s and the 1960s, and they were the precursor to our Māori wardens. It's our people working in those roles that should always be the bridge between the parties, and in the old spirit of kānohi ki te kānohi, the first option is not to go to the court, to seek an order, but work together to find a solution. And the only solution must be not only in the interests of the child, but in the interests of the family. And I'm glad to report that our first trial of this has been rolled out in Upper Hutt. And good, I'm from Upper Hutt, I'm biased. I grew up in Upper Hutt. But it's been rolled out in Upper Hutt by one of our executive members, Tānei Cook, And he has been integrating with the families of prisoners inside, because a lot of families have moved to Rimutaka, or moved to Upper Hutt, to be closer to Rimutaka prison. And we have stopped the taking of children thanks to that partnership in Upper Hutt. And more importantly, don't touch our kids. Don't touch our kids until you work with the Māori organisation to find a better alternative. So we are not waiting for any more reports. We are acting, and my hope is that there will be 16 new community development officers across each of the 16 districts of the Māori Council, not only to act as a bridge, but also to support you in other affairs. Now I want to move to my final issue. I could talk all day to you fellas. I could talk all day. But I want to have a discussion about leadership. I want to talk to you about leadership, because without the right leadership, we are never going to push ourselves forward. And in fact, sometimes we do ourselves a disservice by constantly pot-shotting each other across the lines. Or we've got these Māoris who call themselves Māori leaders. The only person that should be called a Māori leader is who you decide is a Māori leader, not somebody who just inherited a title from Waipukaro Central. And that is why at some point we have to throw that issue on the table, and we have to clearly unify under the spirit of kotahitanga. And we also have to bring together our younger generation and not be like I'm a middle-aged, overweight blood pressure victim. I've got a limited time span. What we should do in recognition of the truth is start mentoring and supporting our young people to take up the mantle of leadership and not have to wait until they're in their 50s. And that is why the New Zealand Māori Council has established once again the Rangatahi New Zealand Māori Council. Not only to give our young people a voice, not only to support them, but encourage them and give them confidence and support to put their issues forward. Because as sure as night follows day, the issues that they're talking about are the same ones we've been confronting every generation. So we need to give them a chance a lot earlier to step up and take on the Crown, take on the government, take on whoever they think needs to be taken on. Because we're not going to be around for a long time. We're around for a good time, but not a long time. And what I would do when each of you go back to your communities is encourage your young people to get involved in the movement. I mean, look at the work of Pani and Newton. What an amazing, amazing individual, eh? Hasn't she done crackerjack stuff? And she's here, she's pregnant, but she's here. I did say to her, hey, if it's a boy, Machi's a good name for a boy. Well, I thought New Zealand Māori Council's name was too far. But the reason this leadership is important is because we've got an election coming up. We've got an election coming up where a whole lot of people are going to be wanting your votes. They're going to be slippery sliming through your little fingers, a whole lot of baubles of the Crown. And they're going to try and convince you that they have the right ideas. Now, interestingly enough, that's what they've been doing since the beginning, and look at us, look at where we are. So when you consider who you're going to vote for, do one thing first. For God's sake, get enrolled to vote. Get enrolled to vote. Go back to your houses, go back to your communities, go and spread that message. I'm not telling you who to vote for. That would be bloody arrogant. I'm encouraging you to get out and get registered to have the chance to have your say and knock some of these fellas on the head. And if they are not working for you, just because they may bring a baby around like Tamati does, you know, on the odd occasion through the Wairiki, beautiful little baby, but come on, let's keep the politics out of the baby. Unless they have done something and unless they have achieved something for their local communities, then turf them out and put somebody in that you feel can do a better job. And not in 6 years' time, not in 9 years' time, not in 20 years' time, but within the next 3 years. So, I could talk to you for a long time, like I said. I won't because my voice is going. But I'll say this is my final message. The Māori Council has been around for a very long time. It's not my council, it's not the chairman's council, it's not Raywin's council, it's your council. It's your council. Well, I've just railed against the government. I can't see how it's a government's council if I'm constantly telling them, look, brother. My point is there are Māori committees right across all of the districts of the council. So get involved. Thank you very much, everyone.
Kia ora tātou. Just while we've still got Matt here, We've got a couple of bodies across the country from the Kingitanga. We've also got the body up here that was set up there with the Council of the Chairs. We've also